Hi guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything at all from my work, a connect, dot, an epiphany, a mind-blown moment, or explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore. Please consider supporting my work. All the links are in the description below. And if you're interested in artwork and very price effective, AllyKatzkreations211.com. Business card holders, you put it in a little heart, and I make them as gems. Different types of colors. I do skulls, pyramids, paintings, all kinds of fun stuff. So go check out my portfolio. Every few weeks, I add some stuff there, just to give it a sample of the work that I am doing. I can customize a lot of things, so please check that out. That's a good way to support me and keep me doing this work. Urantia, as you see. We're going to do paper 68, The Dawn of Civilization. Before I begin, I was away this weekend. I went to go to the boyfriend's farm, his family's farm, and we did some shooting practice. It was really fun, but we happened to stay an extra day. Wasn't planning on, so I'm a little behind on my work. So sorry this is being done late. I also woke up not in the best physical circumstances. Don't feel good. I feel much better now than I did a few hours ago. Very scary. But I'm fine. So I'm like, I gotta get this done. This is the beginning of the narrative of the long forward struggle of the human species from a status that was little better than an animal existence. Through the intervening ages and down to the latter times, when a real, through imperfect civilization had evolved among the higher races of mankind. Civilization is our radical acquirement. It is not biological inherent. Hence, must all children be reared in an environment of culture, while each succeeding generation of youth must receive anew its education. The superior qualities of civilization, scientific, philosophic, and religious, are not transmitted from one generation to another by direct inheritance. These cultural achievements are preserved only by the enlightened conservation of social inheritance. Social evolution of the cooperative order was initiated by the Dalmatria teachers, and for 300,000 years, mankind was nurtured in the idea of group activities. The blue man, most of all, profited from these early social teachings, the red man to some extent, and the black man least of all. In more recent times, the yellow race and the white race have presented the most advanced social development on Urantia. Pause. I don't ordinarily do this with this book, but something does bother me. With the color races, my divine higher self, if you are of the copper color race between the red and the black man, meaning you have melanin and pigmentation in your skin. I have freckles. It does not qualify me as being completely melanin, but I have enough that I'm like a hybrid in a sense. I will tell you why. They kind of knock that color down a lot. It's a narrative being steered in the wrong direction. And I don't quite like it. Because as the divine breath breathed all vibratory states and frequencies into existence, which existence is infinite, it's infinite, it's eternal, all is source. So the division of putting somebody above or below you is null and void here. It's just not the case. We have to start seeing people as equals. And I think this race that helped channel this book to whoever wrote this, okay, just put this in perspective. Not all of this is wrong, but there's definitely a narrative being steered here. And just keep an objective head above you and on you, because they don't want us to achieve unity consciousness as human species. They don't want us getting our strength. And our strength is the Earth races and the galactic races that are incarnated here on this planet, joining actually up together and being the species that we were meant to be. We were divided heavily. So just something to put out there as a thought. You don't need to agree with me. You don't need to align with that. I just don't, when I go up and I get channeled things, I could see the narrative here, and I'm not a fan of that. I just want to put that out there. Protective civilization. When brought closely together, men often learn to like one another, but primitive man was not naturally overflowing with the spirit of brotherly feeling and desire for social contact with his fellows. Rather did the early races learn by sad experience that in union there is strength. And it is this lack of natural brotherly attraction that now stands in the way of immediate realization of the brotherhood of man on Urantia. Association early became the price of survival. The lone man was helpless unless he bore a tribal mark with testified that he belonged to a group, which would certainly average any assault made upon him. Even in the days of king, and it was failed to go abroad alone without some mark of group association. Civilization has become man's insurance against violent death, while the premiums are paid by submission to society's numerous law demands. I just said something. I didn't even read this part. See how that sinks? Primitive society was thus founded on the reciprocity of necessity and on enhanced safety and association. And human society has evolved in age-long cycles as a result of this isolation fear by means of reluctant cooperation. Primitive human beings early learned that groups are vastly greater and stronger than the mere sum of their individual units. 100 men united and working in unison can move a great stone. A score of well-trained guardians of the peace can restrain an angry mob, and so society was born, not of mere association of numbers, but rather as a result of the organization of intelligent cooperators. But cooperation is not a natural trait of man. He learns to cooperate first through fear, and then later because he discovers it is more beneficial in meeting the difficulties of time and guarding against the supposed perils of eternity. The people who thus early organized themselves into a primitive society became more successful in their attacks on nature as well as in defense against their fellows. They possess greater survival possibilities. Hence, has civilization steadily progressed on Urantia, notwithstanding its many setbacks, and it is only because of the enhancement of survival value in association that man's many blunders have thus far failed to stop or destroy human civilization. That contemporary cultural society is a rather recent phenomenon, is well shown by the present day survival of such primitive social conditions as characterize the Australian natives and the Bushmen and Pygmies of Africa. Among these backward peoples, many may be observed something of the early group hostility, personal suspicion, and other highly antisocial traits, which were so characteristic of all primitive races. These miserable remnants of the non-social peoples of ancient times bear eloquent testimony to the fact that the natural individualistic tendency of man cannot successfully compete with the more potent and powerful organizations and associations of social progression. These backward and suspicious antisocial races that speak a different dialect every 40 or 50 miles illustrate what a world you might now be living in, but for the combined teaching of a corporal staff of the planetary prince and later labors of the atomic group of racial uplifters. The modern phrase back to nature is a delusion of ignorance, a belief in the reality of the one-time fictitious golden age. The only basis for the legend of the golden age is the historic fact of Dalamatria and Eden. But these improved societies were far from the realization of utopian dreams. Factors in social progression. Civilized society is the result of man's early efforts to overcome his dislike of isolation. But this does not necessarily signify mutual affection, and the present turbulent state of certain primitive groups well illustrates what the early tribes came up through. But though the individuals of a civilization may collide with each other and struggle against one another, and though civilization itself may appear to be an inconsistent mass of striving and struggling, it does evidence earnest striving, not the deadly monotony of stagnation. While the level of intelligence has contributed considerably to the rate of cultural progress, society is essentially designed to lessen the risk element in the individual's mode of living, and it has progressed just as fast as it has succeeded in lessening pain and increasing the pleasure element in life. Thus does the whole societal body push on slowly toward the goal of destiny, extinction, or survival, depending on whether that goal is self-maintenance or self-gratification. Self-maintenance originates society, while excessive self-gratification destroys civilization. Society is concerned with self-perpetuation, self-maintenance, and self-gratification, but human self-realization is worthy of becoming the immediate goal of many cultural groups. The herd instinct in natural man is hardly sufficient to account for the development of such a societal organization as now exists on Urantia, though this innate gregarious propensity lies at the bottom of a human society. Much of man's sociability and an acquirement. Two great influences which contributed to the early association of human beings were food, hunger, sex, love. These instinctive urges men shares with the animal world. Two other emotions which drove human beings together and held them together were vanity and fear, more particularly ghost fear. History is but the record of man's age-long food struggle. Primitive man only thought when he was hungry. Food saving was his first self-denial, self-discipline. With the growth of society, food hunger ceased to be the only incentive for mutual association. Numerous other sorts of hunger, the realization of various needs, all led to the closer association of mankind. But today's society is top-heavy with the overgrowth of supposed human needs. Occidental civilization of the 20th century groans wearily under the tremendous overload of luxury and the inordinate multiplication of human desires and longings. Modern society is enduring the strain of one of those most dangerous phases of far-flung inter-association and highly complicated interdependence. Hunger, vanity, and ghost fear were continuous in their social pressure, but sex gratification was transient and spasmodic. The sex urge alone did not impel primitive men and women to assume the heavy burden of home maintenance. The early home was founded upon the sex restlessness of the male when deprived of frequent gratification, and upon that devoted mother love of the human female, which in measure she shares with the females of all the higher animals. The presence of a helpless baby determined the early differentiation of male and female activities. The woman had to maintain a settled residence where she could cultivate the soil, and from the earliest times, where women has always been regarded as the home. Woman thus early became indispensable to the evolving social scheme, not so much because of the fleeting sex passion as in consequence of food requirements. She was an essential partner in self-maintenance. She was a food provider, a beast of burden, and a companion who would stand great abuse without violent resentment. And in addition to all of those desirable traits, she was an ever-present means of sex gratification. Almost everything of lasting value in civilization has its roots in the family. The family was the first successful peace group, the men and women learning how to adjust their antagonisms, while at the same time teaching the pursuits of peace to their children. The function of marriage and evolution is the insurance of race survival, not merely the realization of personal happiness, self-maintenance, and self-perpetuation, are the real objects of the home. Self-gratification is incidental and not essential except as an instinctive ensuring sex association. Nature demands survival, but the arts of civilization continue to increase the pleasures of marriage and the satisfactions of family life. If vanity be enlarged to cover pride, ambition, and honor, then we may discern not only how these propensities contribute to the formation of human associations, but how they also hold men together, since such emotions are futile without an audience to parade before. Soon vanity associated with itself other emotions and impulses, which required a social arena wherein they might exhibit and gratify themselves. This group of emotions gave origin to the early beginnings of all art, ceremonial, and all forms of sportive games and contests. Vanity contributed mightily to the birth of society, but at the time of these revelations, the devious strivings of a vainglorious generation threatened to swamp and submerge the whole complicated structure of a highly specialized civilization. Pleasure want has long since superseded hunger want. The legitimate social aims of self-maintenance are rapidly translating themselves into base and threatening forms of self-gratification. Self-maintenance builds society unbridled, and self-gratification unfailingly destroys civilization. Socializing influence of ghost fear. Primitive desires produced the original society, but ghost fear held it together and imparted an extra-human aspect to its existence. Common fear was psychological in origin, fear of physical pain, unsatisfied hunger, or some earthly calamity, but ghost fear was a new and sublime sort of terror. Probably the greatest single factor in the evolution of human society was the ghost dream. Although most dreams greatly perturbed the primitive mind, the ghost dream actually terrorized early man, driving these superstitious dreamers into each other's arms in willing and earnest association for mutual protection against the vague and unseen imaginary dangers of the spirit world. The ghost dream was one of the earliest appearing differences between the animal and the human types of mind. Animals do not visualize survival after death. Except for this ghost factor, all society was founded on fundamental needs and basic biologic urges. But ghost fear introduced a new factor in civilization, a fear which reaches out and away from the elemental needs of the individual, and which rises far above even the struggles to maintain the group. The dread of the departed spirits of the dead brought to light a new and amazing form of fear, an appalling and super powerful terror, which contributed to whipping the loose societal orders in early ages into a more thoroughly disciplined and better controlled primitive groups of ancient times. These senseless superstitions, some of which still persist, prepared the minds of men through superstitious fear of the unreal and the supernatural for the later discovery of the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. So much I want to say right there. The baseless fears of evolution are designed to be supplanted by the awe for deity inspired by revelation. The early cult of ghost fear became a powerful social board and bond. Ever since that far distant day, mankind has been striving more or less for the attainment of spirituality. Ooh, hi. Where do we think the fear of God came into existence on earth? Supplanted by superior, malicious entities who wanted to dominate power over others. This is the why I have a confliction with this book. There's a lot of truth in it. I'm not disclaiming it, but reading that right there, this is how we were as a species manipulated in human form, material form, bodily form, not spirit. We are spirit, we are soul, inhabiting a vehicle. Source is the frequency of love. So how can we fear love if it's source, God? And this is how things get a little twisty and manipulated. We have to realize that this is what happens when you neglect to put in that this is channeled from a species of an interpreted, what their interpretation of what happened here was. It's not the end all be all truth, because truth is just a perception at a frequency, right, that you're vibrating at. So if you're vibrating here and you're meshing with this literature, that's wonderful. I'm not here to knock you. I'm here to just point something out. What I'm noticing is how they're wording things is a narrative, and it's also a program. And we can see now, if we go back to think, well, if God should be all loving and we're supposed to achieve this status state of unconditional love to rise our frequency and vibratory states within our vehicle to hit fifth density, fifth dimension, and be in that state of love frequency, how could we fear anything? Because fear is non-existent out of this holographic simulated matrix. It's a school. It's just here for us to learn from. When you rise above the fear and know it's not, it's an illusion, they're not telling you that. There's where I have the problem. They're showing you through them telling us where the fear generated from. They didn't realize their dream states is their other selves, and because they weren't consciously, they were still in self-discovery mode. That's early third density. They didn't understand that they were actually capturing their other selves doing other things. What do you think your dreams are? And some of it is just psychologically subconscious, and some of the stuff that does occur in vividness is your other selves. You just need to capture that and understand it. But again, that's just my perception of the interpretation that I'm receiving from this book. Yours might be different, and that's absolutely okay. I just like to expand the questions here. Hunger and love drove men together. Vanity and ghost fear held them together. But these emotions alone, without the influence of peace-promoting revelations, are unable to endure the strain of the superstitious and irritations of human interassociations. Without help from superhuman sources, the strain of society breaks down upon reaching certain limits. And these very influences of social mobilization, hunger, love, vanity, and fear conspire to plunge mankind into a war and bloodshed. There's your polarities right there. The peace tendency of the human race is not a natural endowment. It is deprived from the teachings of revealed religion, from the accumulated experience of the progressive races, but more especially from the teachings of Jesus, the Prince of Peace. Oh boy. Evolution of the Moors. All modern social institutions arise from the evolution of the primitive customs of your savage ancestors. The conventions of today are the modified and expanding customs of yesterday. What habit is to the individual custom is to the group, and the group customs developed into folk ways or tribal traditions, mass conventions. From these early beginnings, all of the institutions of present-day human society take their humble origin. It must be borne in mind that the Moors originated in an effort to adjust group living to the conditions of mass existence. The Moors were men's first societal institution, and all of these tribal reactions grew out of the effort to avoid pain and humiliation, while at the same time seeking to enjoy pleasure and power. The origin of folk ways, like the origin of languages, is always unconscious and unintentional, and therefore always shrouded in mystery. Ghost fear drove primitive man to envision the supernatural and thus securely laid the foundation for those powerful social influences of ethics and religion, which in turn preserved inviolate the mores and customs of society from generation to generation. The one thing which early established and crystallized the Moors was the belief that the dead were jealous of the ways by which they had lived and died. Therefore, would they visit dire punishment upon those living mortals who dared to treat with careless disdain the rules of living, which they had honored when in the flesh. All this is best illustrated by the present reverence of the yellow race for their ancestors. Later developing primitive religion greatly reinforced ghost fear in stabilizing the Moors, but advancing civilization has increasingly liberated mankind from the bondage of fear and slavery of superstition. Prior to the liberating and liberalizing instruction of the Dalamatria teachers, ancient man was held a helpless victim of the ritual of the Moors. The primitive savage was hedged about by an endless ceremonial. Everything he did from the time of waking in the morning to the moment he fell asleep in his cave at night had to be done just so, in accordance with the folk ways of the tribe. He was a slave to the tyranny of usage. His life contained nothing free, spontaneous, or original. There was no natural progress toward a higher mental, moral, or social existence. Early man was mightily gripped by custom. The savage was a venerable slave to usage, but there has arisen ever and anon those variations from type who have dated in inaugural new ways of thinking and improved methods of living. Nevertheless, the inertia of primitive man constitutes the biologic safety brake against precipitation too suddenly into the ruinous maladjustment of a too rapidly advancing civilization. But these customs are not as unimaginated evil. Their evolution should continue. It is nearly fatal to the continuance of civilization to undertake their wholesale modification by radical revolution. Custom has been the thread of continuity. which held civilization together. The path of human history is strewn within the remnants of discarded customs and obsolete social practices. But no civilization had endured which abandoned its mores, except for the adoption of better and more fit customs. The survival of a society depends chiefly on the progressive evolution of its mores. The process of custom evolution grows out of the desire for experimentation. New ideas are put forward and competition ensues. A progressing civilization embraces the progressive idea and endures time and circumstance. Finally, select the filter group for survival. But this does not mean that each separate and isolated change in the composition of human society has been for the better. No, indeed, no. For there have been many, many retrogressions in the long forward struggle of Urantia civilization. Meep. Land techniques and maintenance art. Land is the stage of society. Men are the actors. Couldn't agree more. They give you some truth right there. And man must ever adjust his performances to conform to the land situation. The evolution of the mores is also and always dependent on the land-man ratio. This is true notwithstanding with the difficulty of its discernment. Man's land technique or maintenance arts plus his standards of living equal the sum total of the folkways, the mores, and the sum of man's adjustment to the life demands equals his cultural civilization. The earliest human cultures arose along the rivers of the Eastern Hemisphere, and there were 4 great stages in the forward march of civilization. They were the collective stage, food corrosion, hunger led to the first form of industrial organization, the primitive food gatherings lines. Sometimes such a line of hunger march would be 10 miles long as it passed over the land gleaning food. This was the primitive nomadic stage of culture and is the mode of life now, followed by the African bushman. The hunting stage. The invention of weapon tools enable man to become a hunter and thus to gain considerable freedom from food slavery. A thoughtful Adonite who had severely bruised his fist in a serious combat rediscovered the idea of using a long stick for his arm and a piece of hard flint bound on the end with snooze for his fist. Many tribes made independent discoveries of this sort, and these various forms of hammers represented one of the great forward steps in human civilization. Today, some Australian natives have progressed little beyond this stage. The blue men became expert hunters and trappers. By fencing the rivers, they caught fish in great numbers, drying the surplus for the winter use. Many forms of ingenious snares and traps were employed in catching game, but more primitive races did not hunt the larger animals. The pastoral stage, the phase of civilization, was made possible by the domestication of animals. The Arabs and the natives of Africa are among the more recent pastoral peoples. Pastoral living afforded further relief from food slavery. Man learned to live on the interest of his capital, the increase in his flocks, and this thus provided more leisure for culture and progress. Pre-pastoral society was one of sex cooperation, but the spread of animal husbandry reduced women to the depths of social slavery. In earlier times, it was man's duty to secure the animal food, women's business to provide the vegetable edibles. Therefore, when men entered the pastoral era of his existence, woman's dignity fell greatly. She must still toil to produce the vegetable necessities of life, whereas the man needed only to do his herds to provide an abundance of animal food. Man thus became relatively independent of women. Throughout the entire pastoral age, women's status steadily declined. By the close of this era, she had become scarcely more than a human animal, consigned to work and to bear human offspring, much as the animals of the herd were expected to labor and bring forth young. The men of the pastoral ages had great love for their cattle, or the more pity they could not have developed a deeper affection for their wives. The agricultural stage. This era was brought about by the domestication of plants, and it represents the highest type of material civilization. Both Caligastia and Adam endeavored to teach horticulture and agriculture. Adam and Eve were gardeners, not shepherds, and gardening was an advanced culture in those days. The growing of plants exerts an ennobling influence on all of races of mankind. Agriculture more than quadrupled the land-man ratio of the world. It may be combined with the pastoral pursuits of the former cultural stage. When the three stages overlap, men hunt and women till the soil. There has always been friction between the herders and the tillers of the soil. The hunter and herder were militant, warlike. The agriculturist is more peaceful, loving type. Association with animals suggested struggle and force. Association with plants instills patience, quiet, and peace. Agriculture and industrialism are the activities of peace, but the weakness of both as world social activities is that they lack excitement and adventure. Human society has evolved from the hunting stage through that of the herders to the territorial stage of agriculture. And each stage of this progressive civilization was accompanied by less and less of nomadism. More and more men became to live at home. And now is industry supplementing agriculture with consequently increased urbanization and multiplication of non-agricultural groups of citizenship classes. But an industrial era cannot hope to survive if its leaders fail to recognize that even the highest social developments must either rest upon a sound agricultural basis. Evolution of culture. Man is a creature of the soil, a child of nature. No matter how earnestly he may try to escape from the land, in the last reckoning, he is certain to fail. Dust you are, and dust you shall return is literally true of all mankind. The basic struggle of man was and is and ever shall be for land. The first social associations of primitive human beings were for the purpose of winning these land struggles. The land-man ratio underlies all social civilization. Man's intelligence by means of the arts and sciences increased the land yield. At the same time, the natural increase in offspring was somewhat brought under control, and thus was provided the subsistence and leisure to build a cultural civilization. Human society is controlled by a law which decrees that the population must vary directly in accordance with the land arts and inversely with a given standard of living. Throughout these early ages, even more than at present, the law of supply and demand as concerned men, land determined the estimated value of both. As my pages get stuck here. Finally, sorry about that. During the times of plentiful land on occupied territory, the need for man was great, and therefore the value of human life was much enhanced. Hence, the loss of life was more horrifying. During periods of land scarcity and associated overpopulation, human life became comparatively cheapened, so that war, famine, and pestilence were regarded with less concern. When the land yield is reduced or the population is increased, the inevitable struggle is renewed. The very worst traits of human nature are brought to the surface. The improvement of the land yield, the extension of the mechanical arts, and the reduction of population all tend to foster the development of the better side of human nature. Frontier society develops the unskilled side of humanity. The fine arts and true scientific progress, together with spiritual culture, have all thrived best in the larger centers of life, when supported by an agricultural and industrial population slightly under the land-man ratio. Cities always multiply the power of their inhabitants for either good or evil. The size of a family has always been influenced by the standards of living. The higher the standard, the smaller the family, up to the point of established status or gradual extinction. All down through the ages, the standards of living have determined the quality of a surviving population in contrast with mere quantity. Local class standards of living give origin to new social castes, new mores. When standards of living become too complicated or too highly luxurious, they speedily become suicidal. Caste is the direct result of the high social pressure of keen competition produced by dense populations. The early races often resorted to practices designated and designed to restrict population. All primitive tribes killed deformed and sickly children. Girl babies were frequently killed before the times of wife purchase. Children were sometimes strangled at birth, but the favorite method was exposure. The father of twins usually insisted that one be killed, since multiple births were believed to cause either by magic or infidelity. As a rule, however, twins of the same sex were spared. While those taboos on twins were once well nigh universal, they were never a part of the Ananic Moors. These people always regarded twins as omens of good luck. Many races learned the technique of abortion, and these practices became very common after the establishment of the taboo of childbirth among the unmarried. It was long the custom for a maiden to kill her offspring, but among more civilized groups, these illegitimate children became the wards of the girl's mother. Many primitive clans were virtually exterminated by the practice of both abortion and infanticide. But regardless of the dictates of the Moors, very few children were ever destroyed after having once been suckled. Maternal affection is too strong. Even in the 20th century, there persist remnants of these primitive population controls. There is a tribe in Australia whose mothers refuse to rear more than 2 or 3 children. Not long since, one cannibalistic tribe ate every 5th child born. In Madagascar, some tribes still destroy all children born on certain unlucky days, resulting in the death of about 25% of all babies. From a world standpoint, overpopulation has never been a serious problem in the past. But if war is lessened and science increasingly controls human disease, it may become a serious problem in the near future. At such a time, the great test of wisdom of world leadership will present itself. Will Urantia rulers have the insight and courage to foster the multiplication of the average or stabilized human being instead of the extremes of the supernormal and the enormity increasing groups of the subnormal? The normal man should be of the race. The subnormal man should be kept under society's control. No more should be produced than are required to administer the lower levels of industry. Those tasks requiring intelligence above the animal level, but making such a low-grade demands as to provide and prove venerable slavery and bondage for the higher types of mankind. Presented by a Melchizedek, sometimes stationed on Urantia. Now I really question a lot of things that just spoke to us about what a Melchizedek and the presentation of an interpreted perceived reality these people are being given. As much as there is truth in that, there's a lot of truth in what I just read. There is a lot of things that we are now starting to question about the perception of what we get channeled. I question it all the time. Before I even do a TikTok video, I make sure that I'm getting it from my highest oversoul self. I'm not getting it from some ET. And there are people who are consistent with their channeling of ETs. I'm not saying all ETs are bad, but there is malicious ones out there. And the people who kind of channeled this book had a narrative to input and steer you. Why do you think society is the way it is today? Do you really think that we should be slaughtering people for no reason just because they were born on an unlucky day. Oh, it's superstitious. Where did that come from? Oh, you had supplanted it in our society. Thanks. We know it today in this modern time. The female policy in China. There is still tribes cannibalizing people. I mean, you do you boo, but at the same time, the overpopulation, I mean, have anybody gone to the country? Because I can tell you now, there's people there, but there's a megaton of land. And I can't describe how vast these lands are that are unoccupied and that are not being tilled. We all want to improve society and move forward. And yeah, technologically, we're getting more very highly advanced. We're on the dawn of a new Dan, as an Awaspe would say, or we're on the net. We're just about to end a cycle and we're going to transform into something new. That's wonderful. But we need to drop the narrative of the past. And that right there is just showing you how they've been supplanting these ideas and narratives subconsciously and unconsciously through people. We are all one. Source spoke out into frequency, light then pursued. We became material. Our souls are from source. We were made by other ET races, 22 in fact, not just the Anunnaki and Greys and the Dracos. Sorry, it was a whole mixture of different races that supplemented our vehicles. This is why I read what I do, because I know there's a lot of people who follow the Urantia book, and I'm not saying there's a really good information in there, and there's a lot of truth in what they're saying. It's not that it's not true. It's just you see the narrative being plugged in there. Same thing with Owaspi. The Anunnaki wrote that. It's from Orion, for goodness sakes. It's their interpretation and perception of what happened here. That's not a complete picture. They're not giving you the complete picture. That's all I'm saying. There is a lot of information in both of these books. It's mind-boggling. It's expansive, and it will help you look at different viewpoints. But in the breath that I am taking at the same time, we need to be cognizant that there's a narrative in there. There's a narrative in Awaspe. They're inserting programming into you if you suck into it. Same thing with all religion. I am an infinite created being from source. I individuated and densified myself a million times. I am currently running many vehicles and in higher densities. And all of you are too. That's the fun part, is discovering yourself and your other selves. There is nobody superior or inferior to you. That's an illusion you create in your mind. Well, these people are elite. They have all this money. Okay, that's power over others. As you see, there are people that walk around that make a lot of money, but actually distribute their money so it uplifts other people. That class system has failed in so many societies. What people don't understand is that we need to unify. The people that have the darker pigmentation are the anchor to this Gaia, this land, this earth. And the people who are like me are the anchor to the galaxy, the cosmos, the lands beyond, whatever you want to call that. We have the other missing link. But when you combine two together, it's like Captain F and Planet coming together, and woof, unity consciousness will spring forth. Yeshua taught this. The words were misinterpreted and the languages were misinterpreted in translation. There's nothing more powerful than understanding your own power and understanding you are the Christ within. You are Christ. All of us are. And there were multiple Christs before they named Jesus of Nazareth Christ. Please. We got to get out of the superiority of mine is better than your kind of nonsense. It's all one, so it's all the same. It's differentiated for you to learn a lesson from. It's where you were born and the karma that's achieved in that land. That's what you're following. That's what you're honoring. That's what you chose to have an experience through. When we let it all go and release all that anxiety and judgment and fear and nonsense that was here to teach us, now that we have learned the lessons, we don't need those concepts necessarily anymore because we've learned them. We got the wisdom. We walk the walk, talk the talk, and now we're here. Now we can move forward. We don't need to go back there. Yeah, it's nice to understand where our beginnings came from. But if we look to these books as the end all be all, it ain't it. It isn't it. It's a representation of an interpretation of it. And yes, there's a lot of truth in both books. And you might align with one book over the other, or you might align with a huge section and not. I align with a lot of the earlier sections. Like very much align. But now that they're talking about the humans and they're talking about evolution, I see a completely different story. I don't resonate with it. I don't heart align with it. Because now I see it's from their perspective and how they manipulated things here on Earth. And they're not the only race to do it either. So they're not at any more at a pointing finger than all the other places and races that have tried to steer humans in the wrong direction and manipulated us. It's just a very interesting take of this small, very tiny section. But again, I'm not knocking this book. I'm just giving you guys a perception and a bigger viewpoint of understanding that it's a channeled book from a race. So we can take the information objectively and see what aligns with you and your understanding of the truth and your frequency and vibratory states, and you can learn from it. But I'm going to say right now, we need to step away from the fear. There is nothing to fear. And this, the fear source is a power over you, which is an illusion. That's what keeps you from moving and evolving forward. And that's what all those people, all those races, that's what they're afraid of, unless they understand they're here to help, which many are. And it's from the Earth side to the galactic side. We need to merge together and unify. All of humanity needs to come together. And understand it doesn't matter what you listen to, who you preached from, what information your land is giving you, you're this religion or that language. It doesn't matter. We all need to come here. We're slowly getting there, slowly getting there. We're slowly getting to the higher frequency and the higher dimensional states. So just another channeled message from up of my higher self. They want you to understand you need to just pluck what goes here and leave the rest. Sending all of you love, light, protection, energy, shielding, compassion, grace, and all the love of unconditional love. Please be safe, be seen. Anything you could do to Amish mindset, like sharing, subscribing to my channel would be fantastic. Go check me out on TikTok. The link will be in the description. I have a lot of social medias. I'm not always on all of them all the time, but you can always email me if you have any questions, you would like to shoot the breeze. And that is to say, I cannot get back to everybody at once. I do get a lot of emails. I do get a lot of people texting and messaging me. I don't freely hand out my phone number. I do have a life. And soon I will be back to work in August. So my job, I am not picking up my phone or answering email until it's time to go home. So, but if you do get in touch with me, I will eventually get to you. And I do apologize to anybody that I missed. I'm trying to catch up. Life is crazy hectic. I'm going through the ascension just like everybody else. I am upgrading and going through physical symptoms just like everybody else. I am not any different from anybody. So there are days that like today, I had a good weekend, but I didn't feel good half the weekend. I had fun, but I still am going through a lot. And so are a lot of you. So compassion. I love you guys. Please support. Thank you so much for the support. And I hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.